Okay, hello everyone. I am doing this very early. I'm going to try to get it done within a half hour, 45 minutes, something like that. It won't be a very long one today, but I'm getting ready. I got to leave in about 50 minutes to go with my husband to Chicago to pick up our Irish friends that are flying in. So I'm trying to do this very quickly. Okay, so I just wrote the outline literally 30 seconds ago. I'm based off of a conversation that me and a couple of our church ladies and my friend Joyce has been on the show a couple times, based off a conversation that we were having yesterday. And I've been meaning to do one along these lines for a while. Hey, Sarah. Hey, Kaylin. Hey, Ashley. And it is on the subject of giving and taking advice. And I have not forgot about my members. Things have just been completely crazy. So I do want to catch up with you all this week sometime, but it's going to be hard. I'm just going to have to get a quick live in because we are going to Branson Thursday through Saturday. We're going to go to Sight and Sounds and see Esther. So I'm very excited about that. But crazy, crazy in the summer, always. But I did want to talk about this subject, giving and taking advice, really quickly. I think it's a good subject to talk about. And of course, I'm doing this from home. So once again, if I start buffering, just hang in there. Sometimes you might miss the word that I'm saying or phrase. If you do, ask me to repeat it, and I will definitely try to. But it is no secret that we live in a world where everyone has a platform, whether that's Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is. People can give their opinion about every subject. Because of this, there's so much advice out there. We have to pick and choose whose advice we will take and whose we won't. Also, how do we come across in a good way where we won't give unsolicited advice? So my friend Joyce was talking about something that she had come across, and I think this was a really, really good quote. And it really gave me a lot to chew on and think about. And the quote was, "Any unsolicited advice is criticism." And that's true if you think about it, because if you have to give others your opinion about everything, and it's not asked for or it's unsolicited, basically what you're doing is you're offering your criticism. Because if you're giving them your opinion about the way they run their home or the way that they talk to their husband or the way that they're raising their kids or the food that they make in their home, whatever it is, if they didn't ask for your advice in that area, then it's criticism. What you're doing is you're criticizing their methods and their way of doing things. And so I have been guilty of this in the past, but part of it is my personality because I am a fixer. I think more logically. And so when women come to me with a problem, I think that they're coming to me as a way for me to offer a solution, as a way to fix it. So oftentimes I will give them, not criticism, but I'll give them advice because I think they're asking me or they're venting as a way of asking for a solution. And husbands are very guilty of this, and because husbands are more logical. So when you come to your husband and you're just like, I had a terrible day, this went wrong and this went wrong and this went wrong, then they're going to be like, well, then you need to do this and this and this, where sometimes you're just trying to vent. You don't necessarily want a solution. You need someone to listen to you and be like, oh my goodness, that was terrible. I'm so sorry. Not here's how you can fix it. Here's how you can make it so that you can have a meal on the table at a certain time of day. Here's how you can fix it so that your school day runs more smoothly, whatever it may be. So I have gotten into the practice of asking, and we were talking about this yesterday, and some of my friends were saying they have a hard time asking this, but I don't. So a lot of times, do you want advice or are you just venting? And so because in my own marriage with my husband, oftentimes I'll tell him, Tom, I don't want you to try to fix this problem. Just listen to me while I vent. And men oftentimes, they will tune us out, especially because men are fixers as well. And so they want to fix the problem. So oftentimes they'll try tuning us out, but I've had to just be very open and honesty and open communication works really well in my marriage. So maybe it doesn't in yours, but it does in mine. And so I'll just tell him, listen, okay, I need you to get off your phone and I need you to listen to me because I've had a really hard day and I just need compassion right now. Okay. I just need you to understand what I've been through. I don't need you to fix it. It's not anything you can fix, but I need compassion and understanding ear right now. And oftentimes I I will vent to him about things, but I also have a couple best friends. And I am so thankful for them in my life because I will send them long voice messages or long rants, long typed out rants. Um, because and I'm so thankful for women, the women in my life and my community of women, because women, we do have a tendency to understand each other a little bit better than men understand us, which is, it's designed that way. We're different. Our brains work different. No matter what the world tells you, biology is biology, and we're built differently. So I am very thankful for the women in my life. But that being said, I kind of wanted to go into offering advice and then taking advice from people. So number one, obviously, I offer a lot of advice on the show, right? And why do I have this show? What is the purpose of this show? When I was first approached about doing Gently Led Sisters, as most of you know, 5 or 6 years ago, Tommy would have been 15 or 16. My oldest was only 15 or 16 at the time. So I think it was 6 years. I think it's been 6 years now. Many of you know that my co-host who started it with me, she was on the show with me for about 9 months. And then she she told me she was stepping down after about 9 months. So out of the 5 or 6 years, I've been doing it the majority of the time by myself and then just having guests on. I decided to just keep it where I run the majority of it because it is hard. People change and things happen, you know. And in order to not have friction with a co-host, or, you know, if something happened to where she would need to step down, or maybe we took different paths in life, that happens. You know, we all have very close friendships at different seasons in our lives, and sometimes they move on, sometimes things change with the dynamics. So I just kept it with me. My newer listeners won't even remember a lot of that because the show has been around for a long time. But my oldest was about 15 or 16, and I was approached about just doing a recorded podcast. And then I said, well, how about YouTube? Because I'm familiar with YouTube. So we decided to go that route. Well, when we started it, I wanted to make sure, it was my goal, that I didn't talk about things, first of all, to be real and authentic. I've had enough of fake influencers who put on a show, or whatever crowd they're running with, that's what they do. So if they run with a crowd who doesn't believe in makeup or dressing up, they don't wear makeup. Then they run with another crowd. Maybe they dump that crowd and they run with another crowd, and they do wear makeup and they do, you know, dress stylish or whatever. So then they start doing that. Or one crowd doesn't watch TV, so they don't watch the other crowd does watch TV, so they do watch TV. I wanted to strive to just be real and authentic. That's why at times my co-host and I would have differing views. And that was totally fine. I loved that because I didn't want an echo chamber. My husband and I don't like echo chambers. My husband and I both we're both natural born leaders in the sense that we kind of like doing our own thing. We don't like fitting into a mold. We don't like fitting into a certain group. We don't have a certain group that we necessarily see eye to eye with on everything. Even my close friends, you know, we have differing opinions, and that's great. So my purpose of the show was basically to give help to first generation Christians. And when I was approached, that was what she wanted as well, because I believe she was a first generation Christian. And a lot of times when you get saved out of a worldly system of thinking, whether that's feminism or, you know, just a heathenistic society, as far as like you grew up with a lot of drinking and a lot of drugs in the home and a lot of cursing and just basically anything that went on, you did it, right? So you don't have, when you get saved and you're introduced to this Baptist lifestyle, it is quite different. It is a culture shock. So I wanted to be in help and encouragement to those who it was a culture shock for, like, where do I begin, right? And I also wanted to obey the Bible when it comes to the subject. Although I had not raised an entire baby to adult at that time, I knew that the principles were right. in what I was teaching because they were biblical principles. And the Bible does command the older women to teach the younger women. And then it gives a list of things that we're supposed to teach them in, to guide the home, to love their children, to reverence their husbands. So that was my goal. Now we're 5 or 6 years in, I have raised 4 children. Chloe's almost raised, she's like 17 and a half. I have raised at least 3 to adulthood. I've got a 22-year-old, a 21-year-old, an almost 20-year-old, and a 17-year-old. And then I've got younger kids. So living out these same principles, always being real, always being authentic, and always trying to be an encouragement was my goal for the show. I wanted to offer my life experience and things I've learned from, including mistakes I have made. And over the past 6 years, I have made mistakes. Hey, Rachel. I have made mistakes, and I'm hoping that through those mistakes, I can, offer advice to younger moms who are raising children. And I will often talk about those mistakes, such as it's a little too hard on my first few kids. I needed to learn a little bit more grace. Life is not about a checklist and not about raising robots and little soldiers. Life is about teaching them the spirit of what's behind what you're trying to teach them, different things like that. So, one of the things I did not want to do is I purposed that I would not talk about things I have no experience in, which is why I don't have a lot of subjects about what to do if you're in an abusive situation, child abuse, just anything, mental disorders. I have done a few things on postpartum because I did go through a dark valley after Hannah, so I'm a little bit more enlightened about that subject and exactly what it feels like and exactly, and steps that you can do to take to get through that if you're going through that in your life. So those were some of the things that I wanted to make sure I never did. And then I wanted to make sure that I was an encouragement only. I didn't want to guilt anyone or add extra burdens because as moms of many, we have many burdens and we have many things that we juggle. And the last thing I want to do is act like a know-it-all that has it all figured out and you should do it my way or no way and you better take my advice or else. And that's why even when we have posts in the Gently Led Sisters group where people are giving advice that I just think is terrible, and that's happened. That's happened. Whether it comes to raising kids, and oftentimes it comes from moms who have very little kids. And they're giving completely over the top, just, crazy advice. And I will respectfully disagree at times, but then I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to delete their comments. I'm not going to turn off commenting for posts. I'm not going to just fly off the handle because the last thing I want to do is create an echo chamber of everyone agreeing with me completely, being yes, men, women, whatever, if you will. So that is not the kind of environment I wanted to create with this show, with the Gently Led Sisters Facebook group. And if you are on Facebook, we do have a Gently Led Sisters Facebook group. Go ahead and try to find that and join it if you want. It's just a lot of good posts of women asking for, I ask for advice in there. Younger women ask for advice, older women ask for advice, and it's just differing opinions. And something that might work for you might not work for someone else, and so on and so forth. So it's a good group to bounce ideas off of. So even though there have been posts and comments I've completely disagreed with, I want to keep a kind atmosphere in the group, even when we disagree. So I've really tried to do that with the group and this show. I want it to be a place where we feel safe with each other. We don't feel condemned. There is no mom guilt because we induce our own mom guilt quite enough. So anyways, that was the purpose of my show and giving advice. That being said, you don't have to take my advice. You can listen, you can have your own opinions. And I never want to usurp the authority in your life. So if I am giving you advice and your husband says that is off the wall, that's crazy, we're not doing that. Please listen to him. Don't fight him. Do what he wants. I do not want people being like, I got this from Cassandra McMurtry and your husband hates it. So you need to do what he wants you to do. You need to listen to him. What works for me might not work for you. And it is not my intention to ever cause strife. It is my intention to help your life and be an encouragement to you. not to cause strife in your home. So that being said, how do we offer advice to those in our own lives, not social media, not on a platform? How do we offer advice to those in our lives personally? So, like I said, one of the number one things I do is I ask them, do you want advice or do you just want to vent? If they want to vent, be there for them. Tell them, I am so sorry you're going through this. That stinks. That's terrible. You're going through the worst thing ever. I mean, whatever they need to hear, tell them. Sometimes we just need compassion and we need a listening ear in our life. So don't try to one up each other. There's always that story. Someone has a horrible birth story and they're telling it to a group of women, and there's another woman that always has it worse. Don't be the one that always has it worse. You know, it's not edifying, it's not encouraging, and it makes the person telling, well, I feel stupid now because I thought that was pretty bad, but it sounds like her story is that much worse, so maybe I'm just a pansy, or maybe I'm just weak, or whatever it is. Every single one of us has things in our life that are hard, and just because it's not as hard as what someone else is going through, it doesn't make it any less hard for the person going through it. So I hate that phrase, someone always has it worse, because yeah, that's universal. Someone is always going to have it worse. But if I have a day where my washer broke and my dishwasher broke and the sink is clogged and the toilet's overflowing and the dog ran away and my cat got hit by my car, I know there's a homeless person somewhere that has it worse than me. I know this, but I don't need to hear that at that time. It was still a terrible day. So I need to hear, oh man, that's terrible. I'm sorry. What can I do to help? Whatever it is, you don't need to try to one up each other. Be real with other people when offering advice. Be authentic. I think, and we were talking about this a little bit yesterday too. Some people get not creeped out, but some people get nervous. That's the word. Some people get nervous when others are telling them about their messy. When I say messy, I mean different emotional things that they're going through, and whether that's anxiety or depression or horrible thoughts that might cross their mind. When telling other people about that, sometimes people have a tendency to get nervous and to get very freaked out about that. But I think what we all need as moms and Christians, and we need authenticity in our lives, because there is so much fakeness out there. And there's this, even among the Baptist world, there's a certain persona that you're supposed to have, or a model. And that model is, we're all just, happy women who never get down, and life is grand and life is great and everything is always joyful and sunshine and butterflies. And that's just not accurate. That's just not real. We all have bad days. We all have days where being a mom is just really, really hard. And I think when we hide that authenticity from others, it has a way of discouraging and not edifying, because then they feel all alone and they feel like they're on an island and no one else knows what they're going through. Where if we were just authentic and real with each other and open with each other, we would see that we're not on an island and that we all struggle. And it's just, it is. And for me, I feel like, because I have a strong personality, right? And this is where my type 8 personality comes in. I've had to really readjust my mindset throughout the years, because I have gone through some pretty rough times in my life. But a lot of people wouldn't know that, because I choose to I'm a very strong personality, so I'm able to just deal with it. I'm able to deal with it, and only those who are really closest to me know that I'm going through it, because I will vent to them about it and they help me get through it. The Lord obviously is number one, but my friends help me get through it. And so I have had to present a strong face in public oftentimes. And I think people think because of that, it doesn't affect me, but it does. We all go through battles and we all go through struggles. And there's been many times when I've cried myself to sleep, or I've cried in the shower. And it's not a side of me that most people see often, but there have been, I'm not stone cold. Things do affect me. And so oftentimes maybe someone will be going through something that I've already been through time and time and time again in my life. And I honestly just want to tell them, suck it up, buttercup. You can get through this, you know? But that's where compassion comes in. And I need to remind myself, Cassandra, you know, they are not you. They don't have your personality. They have a different personality than you. So you need to be gentle at this time. You need to be kind. You need to be compassionate, or whatever it is. And it's that way with my kids too, mainly with my kids. I'm talking about mainly with my, because a lot of times I look at their life and how they've been raised. I'm like, oh my word, you have it so good, you know, compared to what I went through in this area, or compared to what I, you know, what happened to me in this area. And I have to be careful. Okay, well, it's still relevant to them. They're still having a hard time now with it, so I need to be passionate with them. So, you know, we gotta, if you've got a personality similar to mine, you might find yourself having to check yourself and remind yourself, you know, that you need to be kind, you need to be compassionate. You know, tell our own struggles to each other, but not in a competitive way or as a way to one up each other, but as a way of saying, I understand, you're going to get through this. It's a season. You can do this. You can get through this. It's a season. You can do it. I went through it and I got through it. It was so hard. And I don't even remember that time in my life. It's a blur, but I did it. And I came out, and it does get better. Be blunt if asked to be blunt. My friend Nicole, she was telling me that oftentimes she will call me just so I can talk her down and tell her what she needs to hear, because she knows it logically, but she needs to hear it from me. And so I love her because she's pretty much non-offendable, which I love about people. Like, I love it when you have a friend who's non-offendable. And it's funny because I heard, it's one of my favorite sayings now. Those that are easily offended are showing you how little grace they have for others. Those who take a lot to offend are showing you that they have much grace for others. And that fits Nicole to a T. She's one of the most gracious people I know. Sometimes I'll just be venting about something that happened, or someone is like, I can't believe they did that. Can you believe they did that? And maybe it's really bad. And she'll be like, well, maybe they did it because of this. Like, she's always trying to give them like the benefit of the doubt. And sometimes I'm like, you know what, Nicole, just, you're probably right, but it was still terrible what they did, you know? So we really balanced each other out well in that situation, because in those type of situations, because sometimes she'll be like, Cassandra, I need you to just tell me how it is. And I'm like, okay, here I go. So then I'll tell her how it is. And you know, sometimes people need the bluntness. Sometimes people just really are at a loss and they have no idea, where do I go next from here? And then for me too, I just want to say, sometimes there are no good solutions. There are no good answers that I can offer, because things have gotten too messy, and one decision has led to this, and this decision led to this, and it's just too messy. And I can't really offer you good solutions. I can't fix. When you're in ministry, you're going to find that people will often come to you for advice and counsel when a situation has gotten so incredibly messy that there's nothing you can do or say that would totally fix the situation. That's happened a lot. And then the sad part is, you will get blamed when it falls apart even worse, because, well, your advice didn't help us, or you counseled us too late, or, you know, this or that, or whatever it is. And they're gonna need someone to blame, and you're gonna be the bad guy. Even though by the time they came to you with said situation, it was spiraling so far out of control, because usually people will wait to bring others into their problems until it's almost too late to rectify the situation. That's usually what happens in ministry related things. And so when it gets to that point where it's just exploded, you're supposed to go around and pick up all these fragments from the grenade that went off, and it's just impossible. There's been too many decisions that led to the explosion. And you know, so just remember that when coming to me or anyone in ministry with, you know, go before the problem gets too big. And then anytime someone outside of your situation knows of something going on, it has the potential to get messier. So keep your circle of confidence very, very small, because especially with marriage problems, even kid-parent relationships and friendship problems, the more people that know, the messier it gets. So just keep that in mind as well. But learn how to be blunt with kindness. You don't have to steamroll, even when someone says, can I have your opinion in this? I want it straight. Like, I want the truth. I want it straight. You still don't have to steamroll them. You don't have to call names. You don't have to put them down. You can say the truth in kindness. Okay. So now, how do we take advice? First of all, you have to ask. You have to ask for advice. And nothing happens until you ask. But first, examine before you speak or before you ask. So examine the life of the person you're asking, basically. Basically, what is the fruit in their life? What is the fruit in their marriage? Are they kind to their husbands? Are they listening to their husbands? Do they reverence their husbands? Do they have a good marriage, or is their home a war zone? Look at the kids. If you're going to someone for parenting advice, you have to look at their fruit, okay? Because if someone is offering parent, now they can offer you advice on I messed up and this is the mistake I made along the way, and maybe that's one way you can look at it. But look at the fruit. So have they raised kids, first of all? Why are you asking someone for parenting advice who has a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old? They haven't even raised anything. You don't know if their methods work. You don't know. Maybe they're too harsh. Maybe they're too lenient. If someone has adult kids, are those kids still in church? Are those kids living for the Lord? Do those kids love the Lord? Are those kids out there in the world doing every worldly thing the world has to offer? What do you want your product to be? What do you want your fruit to be? Do you want the fruit of worldly kids out there in the world, drinking, smoking, you know, whatever it is, doing drugs, on the police reports, shacking up, fornicating? Do you want that fruit? Or do you want the fruit of the married kids who are still in church, serving the Lord, soul winning, tithing, who love their parents, have a good relationship with their parents, and speak highly of their parents? Which fruit do you want? So examine before you ask. Take the advice of someone with little kids with a grain of salt. Take the advice of someone whose kids have gone hog wild. Take the advice with a grain of salt, and take the advice even of those who have raised successful kids with a grain of salt, because every situation is different. My home life is different from your home life. My husband's different from your husband. I don't know how strong of a leader your husband is. Is your husband in the picture? Is he helping raise the kids? Is he a loving dad, or does he provoke his kids to wrath? There's a million different variables that goes into every situation when asked for advice. And when I'm asked for advice, I also remember that there are two sides to every story. Okay, so even though someone's emailing me about how awful her husband is, there's his side of the story as well. And I need to be very careful in what advice I give. So, but when it comes to taking advice, I always examine, first of all, if I'm asking for marriage advice from someone, I'll examine the fruit of their marriage. If I'm asking for advice on raising my kids, I will examine the fruit of what they've done. That's why when it comes to raising my kids, I've tried to pattern a lot of what I do after the Angel family. I love the Angel family. Every single one of their kids, almost, I think every single kid actually is in full-time ministry, and they had 6 or 7 kids. They're either missionaries, or they are on staff at a church, or they're serving in their local church. I think they have missionary kids, Baptist church staff, and then also evangelists. I think some of them are married to evangelists. So they have a very good product. So I listen intensely to any advice that they offer on the home, raising kids, marriage advice. They have a very good marriage. So they are the type of family that I will take advice from, and I will ask advice from. I'm very excited because there is a retreat coming up where Mrs. Angel is the speaker, and I'm very excited to listen to her. I have a very few speakers that I actually like listening to, and she is one of them. I love her. They have wonderful fruit in every area of their life, and they're just great people. So that's just an example. Realize you can find nuggets of truth in every situation, and I can. It doesn't matter who I'm listening to. If they're a Christian, if they're saved, if they're filled with the Spirit, I can find a nugget of truth, even if I don't take all of the advice. I don't have to take all the advice someone's given me, but I can often find it, oh, that's so good. Like, that would apply to my life. I can use that. And I often do that when listening to advice. And then don't feel badly about doing what is best for your family. If my advice does not help your home, then please don't take it. if Mrs. Angel's advice is not going to help my home, then I'm not going to take it. Now, it's more likely that hers is because she's a pastor's wife and she's in ministry, and we have a lot of the same type of situations going on in our home with her husband being a pastor. So I'm going to be more apt to listening to her advice over maybe someone who's married to a doctor and their life is completely different than my life. So you can never feel badly for doing what's best for your family, though. That's the goal, is to encourage and edify your family and to do what's best for your family. So what about when someone doesn't take our advice, though? A caution to ministry people, because oftentimes we get it and it's like we seek validation for, okay, I gave this awesome advice and I know it's going to work because it's worked for me and it's worked for others. And then they decide they're not going to take your advice and they're going to do completely opposite of what you say, which happens all the time. I would say 95% of people are not asking you for your advice. If you're in ministry, whether it's a pastor or a pastor's wife, they're not asking you for your advice because they are going to take it. They're asking your advice for validation for their choices. And when you don't, and this often causes problems, because when you don't give them the validation they're looking for, sometimes it's really a terrible decision. And you're like, no, I'm sorry, I can't agree with that. Then they turn on you, usually is what happens, but it gets really messy. So as ministry leaders, though, or anyone who, someone asks you for advice and then you see them do the opposite of what you told them, you cannot be offended by that. You cannot get offended. You can't take it personally. Okay, so don't seek validation in how people listen to you, but just offer it with a humble heart, a kind heart, like, this has worked for me, maybe it'll work for you. But it's not your job to control others and how they do things. If they want to ask for advice, that's great. Let them ask for advice, give your opinion, and then leave it there. Don't follow up like, did you take my advice? Did you do what I told you to do? That's never good, because oftentimes if they don't, you'll be like, oh, sometimes you take it personally, like, oh, if you would, it would just help so much. But it's still their life. It's still their choice. You can't force anyone to do anything, and it's not your job to control them or control the outcome. It's just not your job to control that. And then if someone, exactly, Ashley, people will ultimately do what they want to do. And that's fine, because this isn't a cult. Being a Baptist is not a cult. Being in a Baptist church is not a cult. And so everyone has free will. Everyone is allowed to do what works best for them and their family. Everyone is allowed to take your advice or not take your advice. And it's not your job to control them or the outcome. Ultimately, it is their life. It is only your job to control you and your reactions to people, how you interact with people, and your life. It's your job to control the path that you go down, not anyone else's. So don't hold it against that person if they don't. Just be very humble in the way you offer advice, and then just back off. It's up to them now. And then don't say, I told you so, because sometimes, in fact, 99% of the time, people have to figure things out on their own. I've learned through ministry, it is always good to just let people be, let them do their own thing. And even though you can see, because people are people, and outcomes are usually the same when people choose things such as getting mad and leaving a church and going to another, taking a job that takes them out of church, whatever it is, the outcome is almost always the same. And so it's not that we're a prophet, even though my name means prophetess of doom. It's often come true, because I know people and I know outcomes. If they come back repentant, or they come back kind of sheepishly, knowing they made the wrong choice, knowing, it turned out badly, you don't need to be like, I told you so, and all huffy about it and prideful. And you just need to let it go, not say anything else about it. Don't hold it against them. Don't say, I told you so, because that's a very prideful attitude, first of all. It's a very controlling attitude. And yeah, sometimes I admit it feels good when people realize that, they should have just listened to you, and you're like, see, I knew I wasn't wrong. I knew that was going to turn out that way. You can tell yourself that in your own head, and you can tell your husband that, and you two can talk about it, but it's not wise to tell that person that. They already feel bad. As Christians, our whole goal is to be in unity with other Christians. And if something happens where someone gets mad and does something stupid, you want them to be able to come back without fear of repercussion or fear of being told, I told you so, or, fear of being called names, fear of being called stupid, dumb, whatever that is. So really tame your tongue when it comes to this aspect. So just remember, you're in charge of you, not everyone else. You are only in charge of you. So, be humble as a Christian when it comes to taking advice and giving advice. Sometimes it's humbling asking for advice. It's admitting that we don't have it all figured out, which should be easy because none of us do. And it's admitting we have weaknesses and we have flaws, which is silly because we all have weaknesses and we all have flaws, right? None of us have it all figured out. So be willing to grow as a Christian. And that's where asking for advice comes in. When you ask for advice, it's showing that I'm willing to change. I'm willing to grow. I'm not perfect. I don't have it all figured out. And then when you take others' advice, that's humbling in a way because it's showing, okay, you might be stronger in an area than I am. So maybe I need your advice on how to run the home. Maybe I need your advice on how to talk kindly to my husband in marriage. Maybe I need your advice in raising kids. I'm not doing a great job. It's humbling in the way that we are admitting someone else has it figured out a little bit better than us in this subject. And, I've made it no secret that I have my strengths and I have my weaknesses. And if I can get into a routine that will help those weaknesses, I'm all for it. I always want to grow. I want to be a better Cassandra than I was last year. And I want to be a better Cassandra than I was 5 years ago. And there's all these situations that come in my life where I can either get better for it or I can get bitter from it. I can get resentful and I can get vengeful and I can want revenge on maybe someone who's hurt me. But that's not going to help me as Cassandra, as a person. What's going to help me is by letting things go. If someone treats me horribly, just resolving I'm not going to treat others that way. If someone makes a meme attacking me, I'm not going to make memes attacking other people. If someone is talking trash and saying lies and gossiping about me, I'm not going to do that with other people. So I hope that our intention as Christian women is to always grow and to get closer to the Lord than we were a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and realize that none of us have it figured out. So none of us have it figured out when it comes to giving advice. Sometimes I have to tell women, I'm sorry, I don't know what to say. Like, I wish I had more advice to give you, but I don't. How about you reach out to this person? Or how about you listen to this? Or how about, you do this? Because I don't have all the answers. And then sometimes when it comes to asking for advice, just being humble and saying, I don't have it all figured out. And, what would you do in this situation? Can I ask what you would do in this situation? When I had a really hard time nursing Hannah, I'm a 40-year-old mom. I've had 7 kids before her. She's number 8. And I had no qualms with calling my much younger friend Sarah and just telling her my woes about nursing because she had been through it with her oldest. She had already been down that road. I had not. And so even though I was, decade and a half, 2 decades older than her, I had never experienced that. And I was telling her, I've never done this. What are some tips? What are some tricks? Like, help me out here. And she was very kind and, gave me a lot of good suggestions and a lot of good tips and tricks that ended up helping when it came to nursing Hannah, and I was able to nurse her for 9 months. So, just even me taking advice from a mom that's 2 decades younger than me, it's humbling in a way, but it's not, because we're all moms and we all go through different things at different times. And that's why we need to be there for each other. And no condemnation, just encouragement. And we need to be willing to give advice in a kind way, and then also take advice if it's good advice. If it's not, just, eat the meat and spit out the bones. But we can all learn from each other. And there's elements of truth from any Christian, any saved person who has the Holy Spirit living in them. They're going to give some elements of truth. There's not really, like, when it comes to people, even when they're very carnal Christians and you don't really want to be associated with them or have fellowship with them, if they are saved Christians and they have the Holy Spirit living within them, there's always going to be some sort of element of truth to advice that they give. And they're not like all bad or all good. You know, some people have really bad weaknesses, but then they have really strong points that you can learn from. So you have to be careful with just like completely reprobating one whole, you know, like everyone together in one lump sum. Like, no, there's some good things that even carnal people will say or do. So, anyways, I think we can all learn from each other. No, depending on which group you run with in the IFB, we can all learn from each other. And I think it would be good for all of us to have that attitude of learning from others, taking the good, leaving the bad, being good with people asking us for advice, being good with taking advice, and then not holding it over their head if they don't do it, not trying to control them and what they do, but just having a humble spirit overall as we interact with each other. So anyways, that is all I have for today. I got to get in the car and go pick up my husband so we can head to Chicago. And I will try to do a members live. I'm so sorry. It has been so sporadic. In 2 weeks, when I get back on schedule with my teaching, it will be a lot more regimented and life will be back to normal, if you want to say that. So anyways, I hope you all have a good week and I hope to see you soon. Goodbye.